it looks like people have found seats, so that's awesome. We're doing really well. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Anthony Bach-Bucitelli. I'm the director of the Center for Holocaust and Jewish Studies here at Penn State, Harrisburg. And it's my great pleasure to welcome such a wonderful crowd here to our first event in our annual events series for the 2016-17 academic year. It's also my great pleasure to welcome you here for Linda Schwab's talk, A Family Survival. And I'll be introducing our honored speaker here in just a few moments. But first I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Center for Holocaust and Jewish Studies, which supports a mission to research and educate about the Holocaust and Jewish history and culture, especially here in central Pennsylvania. We produce an annual series of academic and cultural events, an exhibition of original artwork, and in fact, our exhibiting artist is, for the current exhibition is here today with us as well, Dr. Mark Blake, who's sitting back there. So it's a pleasure to welcome him here as well. He's got a fantastic exhibition of photography that's hanging over in the Schwab Gallery, which I encourage you, if you haven't seen, to, after the event, walk on over. It's just through the library front lobby. You can find the Schwab Gallery and Reading Room, and on your left-hand side, you can find the exhibition there. So I do encourage you to check it out. It's a wonderful exhibition. We also manage an active research and archival effort here at the center, and a teaching curriculum. And again, it's my pleasure to welcome so many students here today, including undergraduate students from Professor Leifert's class, many of whom are here today. Some of my own students I see, Jen Rappaport sitting back there. And then we have students today from the Silver Academy with us. So we have a fantastic student group with us today. So welcome all the students. The center is supported in large part by the generosity of our donors. So please do consider making a gift or an endowment to support the center's important work. I did want to also talk about a couple of events that we have coming up. Our annual calendar will be released very soon, but I wanted to highlight some of the events that are upcoming so you can be aware of them as well. On November 10th, here on campus in the Gallery Lounge in the Olmsted Building, which is across the quad, at noon on November 10th, we'll have Barbara Tranenblank, a journalist, here to talk about her book on Mary Sachs and the history of Jewish life in Harrisburg. So it's our pleasure to welcome her for that. And then in December, we'll have journalist Julian Volozh, journalist and photographer Julian Volozh, who's based out of New York, here to open his exhibition of photography of Jewish life in Ethiopia. So he'll be putting that exhibit up at that time, and he'll be here speaking as well. And then in January, tied to that exhibition as well, we're pleased to welcome Molly G. Jackson here to talk about her experiences growing up in Ethiopia. And her talk is entitled The Walk to Freedom. So we are very pleased to be able to have that event in in February. Okay, finally, let me offer some thanks to some of the people involved in today's event. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Center's major donors, the Schwab and Aronson families, as well as our many other financial supporters. This generous support makes our work possible and has had a significant impact on the preservation of and education about the Holocaust and Jewish history and culture. I'd also importantly like to thank Vice President Madeline Haynes, Chancellor Mikun Kulkarni, and School of Humanities Director Greg Crawford, who's with us today in the back, for their important and strong support of the Center's research and outreach role here at Penn State Harrisburg. I'd also like to thank Neil Leifert and Eileen Zygon, who are the other members of the Center's steering committee, as well as the Center's founding director, Dr. Simon Bronner, who's with us as well today. And the Center assistants, Ralph Godbold and Hannah Murray, who offer us tremendous support for these events, as well as our many other friends and supporters on campus, who have contributed their ideas, efforts, and time to making the center such a vital organization. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Linda Schwab. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much about Linda's background, because I think she's going to be talking a bit about that today. But I do want to say that we're pleased to be able to host her here. We've had her here on campus to speak before, and we're very happy to have her back. Not only because we get to hear her story again, but also because, as I understand it, Linda for many years didn't speak about these events. And so it's really very important to us to be able to help Linda and others tell their stories as they're comfortable doing. So we're really very pleased to be able to help her do that today. Linda is very active, as many of you know, in the community. She's participated in a number of efforts related to Holocaust education, including Steven Spielberg's Schwab Foundation project, which chronicles Holocaust survivor memoirs worldwide. She and her late husband Morris and Lois Grass helped to create the Bridge to Tomorrow Endowment Fund, which supports local teenagers who wish to participate in the March of the Living, an annual trip to Poland and Israel to study the Holocaust. She also has established locally a Holocaust essay contest for secondary school students in conjunction with the Patriot News. At Penn State Harrisburg, Linda Schwab's work has led to the creation of the Linda Schwab Holocaust Reading Room and Gallery, which is the physical space for the center here on campus. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome to the podium Mrs. Linda Schwab.
Thank you very much. I think he was talking about me. I hope I can get through this without any problems. My knees are a little shaky, but I'll do my best. My name is Linda Schwab, and I am 80 years old. So, I will tell you what I remember, what I think I remember, and what I remember my mother and father telling me, and them speaking of all our past in the DP camps. They spoke a lot about it. Everybody spoke a lot about it, and I picked up a lot from there. So I will try and tell you my story. My parents, my mother came from Vilna, whose father was a very learned rabbi. He was in charge of the printing in Vilna of all the Sidurim, and his name appears in all the Sidurim that were printed there. He had to approve them. My mother, I think, had 5 siblings. They were all sisters. My father came from Yajo, a shtetl near Vilna. It's now Belarusia. And he had a lot of siblings, like I think my brother told me about 15 siblings. My mother was introduced to my father, and they were married, and my father brought her back to Yajo, where we lived. My father was a very hard worker. He had like a dry goods store, materials, and he was very successful. He became very successful, and he helped a lot of people. He became affluent, and so he was able to help a lot of people. And by that, I mean he had orchards, and we had cows and horses, and when anyone came in, he sent them to take whatever they wanted. If they wanted fruit from the orchard, or milk from the cows, or material to make a dress for their daughter's wedding, which they didn't have. He helped them do all that. And those are the people that eventually helped us during the war. We were young children. There were 3 of us. I had an older brother, Harold, and a younger brother, Norman. We were invaded, our village was invaded in 1942. In the beginning, we stayed in our homes, but we had to wear yellow stars on our coats in the front and in the back, or on the armband. And then eventually they moved all the people from their homes to one street, and they called that a ghetto. They were taking the men to work every day. And my father said, I don't like what's happening. I think he needs to find a place for us to hide. And so he went to look for a place. One day, when they took the men to work, the scene that I remember is the men did not return, and my mother and my aunt were standing in front of a window, and they said they were crying, they were pulling on their hair. They just couldn't believe what was happening. And all I remember is I was pulling on my mother's skirt, saying, I want to see, I want to see, I want to see. What was happening is they had all the men in a guest all together, and they had the dogs, the German police dog bite at them. They threw hot water at them. And they were going with the bayonets at the people. And before that, they had him dig a huge hole, and then they threw all the people into this hole. And the people that were still able to walk, they threw them eventually in there too. And I remember seeing it go up and down. People were still alive. That night, my father came to us, and we thought my father was amongst those people as well. But he happened to have gotten away before, and he came for us and took us out. I remember also, I think my father was carrying me, and my shoe fell off, and they picked it up, and my father said maybe we should stop in our house first and get some clothes, warm clothes for the children. And so we did. When we went in there, shortly thereafter, the SS came to get us. Now, the SS at that point must have been celebrating of what happened, and they were drunk, and they were marching us back to the ghetto, and my father was trying to figure out how to get away. And as he started to move away from the walk, the SS guy shot him, and he fell to the ground. And there we were, watching all this happen, and you can't say a word, and you just have to just keep going. I just, when I think of it now, I can't imagine that this, I'm talking about me, my family, but this did happen. They took us back to the ghetto, and my father was shot in the ear, and there was a lot of blood that was on the ground. And when we all left, he got up and he got himself together, and he went back and waited for a few hours, and then came back for us. But that time, he didn't stop anywhere. We just escaped into the forest. And then we went into, I think we were in a few homes. And if I remember correctly, we couldn't stay in the one house because they were telling the people not to help the Jews. And if they were caught, that they would be shot as well. And so we were there and they couldn't keep us. I think we were in 2 places before we ended up being in this man's home whose name was Alexander. And we stayed in his basement. Now the basement was not like it was just a cellar with dirt on the ground, and we were on a plank of wood. We were just with blankets, just laying there. And then my father had to go and beg for food to people's homes because the family of Alexander didn't have enough food to feed themselves, no less for us. And so one day, as he was in this man's house, he said to my father, "I saw your sister." "Where did you see my sister? Where did you see my sister? Take me to her, take me to her." So he took my father to the end of this forest, and there she was, just sitting there with my cousin, with her daughter. And she told us, it's hard for me to believe, but this was so. She told us that they paid this man a lot of money to show them the way to go beyond the border through the forest. And my Aunt Henya and my other Aunt Basha and Henya's daughter Lily was with them. My Aunt Henya could not walk anymore, and she couldn't carry her daughter. And there were other people just like her with children. And what they did was they would take the children and tie them to a tree, hoping that somebody would see the child and save them. They knew that they couldn't save both of them. So she said she couldn't do it. She just couldn't do it. They both have to die. And she was just sitting there waiting for somebody to shoot her. Well, when she saw my father, she couldn't believe it. So he brought her back, and now we were 7 people in that basement just laying there. And imagine, this is, what do parents do with children, little children? How do you keep them entertained when they're hungry and no food, or very little food? I can't believe that I'm talking about me, but this is what happened. And lo and behold, one day, that Alexander came downstairs and said, "My sister was here and she told me that she knew that I was keeping you." And I told her, "No, I was not." So then she left and she came back the next day and she says, "You lied to me. You are keeping Jews, and tomorrow I will bring the SS here. And with that, he went down in the basement and he told us. And so he and my father and all of us, and he took his horse with him, and we went into the forest, and he helped my father dig a cave-like. He found a tree that had a hollow area there, and he helped him dig further into the cave. And that's where we stayed. He took the dirt out of that they dug out and had the horse pull it to a little river like nearby, so people would not recognize that somebody was hiding there. This was very dangerous, and we stayed in that. It was called a Zimlanke. We stayed in that Zimlanke for a year and a half, summer and winter, and it was cold. And the only food we had was when my father would beg for food and bring it back, a loaf of bread divided into 7 pieces. You could eat it in the morning, you could eat it at night. Sometimes he would bring us a bucket with, I don't know, some kind of food, whatever he was able to get, sometimes a bottle of milk. And we stayed there day in and day out, as I said, summer and winter. No, for entertainment in the daytime, we would take off our shirts and take the lice out of there, shake them out, take a comb and get the lice out of our heads because we were constantly scratching ourselves. And every day my father would take out his little Bible and he would go towards the opening of our little cave where it was covered with brush, where he could see, and he would read us Bible stories every single day. That's the schooling that we received. And he would elaborate, but this is every single day. My mother would teach us poetry, Jewish poetry, Russian poetry, lullabies. In fact, recently, when I was in Israel, they asked me to light the Shabbat candles, and I did, and they asked me to say something. So I told them the story of the Bible stories, and they asked me to sing a lullaby, and it was Afi Brüfer Job, Brenta Fire, and the children all related to that, and everybody jumped up and everybody clapped, and I felt like I really had given something to the children that were there. I was real. I was young, just like they were a few years before that. Then one day when my father was begging for food, he was at this friend's house, and the friend was listening to the radio. And on the radio said that the Germans were retreating because they were losing the war. But when they retreat, they were killing everything inside, burning buildings, cattle, everything. And they also said that they were going to go through the forest. Up to now, the people that were hiding in the forest didn't worry so much about that because there were a lot of partisans there. And the Germans were afraid of the partisans, and they couldn't go in there with tanks because the forest was full of marsh. They would sink down. They're not like the tanks are now. And my father said, all of us will never survive. We have to divide into 3 different parts maybe, and maybe somebody will survive and be able to tell the story of how we survived. Maybe somebody will remain. And so he found a haystack, and he put my mother and my younger brother in the haystack, and he said to them, just stay there until I come for you. He found another haystack, and he put my aunt and her daughter there. But he couldn't find another haystack, and he found a lot of brush. And he took the blankets that we had in the cave, and he laid it down, and he put us in there. I also remember being so dry that my father took a spoon that he had, and he put it into the mud and got a little bit of water, and I was just able to wet my lips. Now, there was no food, nothing. And I remember also my father teaching my brother how to whistle, because when he would walk away and he went to look for us, he wouldn't know how to find us. And so he would whistle, and my brother whistled back, and we laid there, and we laid there, and we laid there. And eventually my father said, I think I hear some noise. I think they're coming. And they were coming from the side where my mother and my younger brother were. And he whispered to us, I think they are okay, because we didn't hear any shots. And they kept on going. And eventually they were getting close, and my father said, they're getting close. Now, I could barely see from the ground as they were approaching towards us. And as the soldiers were coming, they called it a tsep. A tsep is like a braid, but it has a different meaning. They were lined up in a row, and they called that a tsep. Like every 10, 15 apart. And the soldier, I could see the German boots. To this day, when I see a movie with German soldiers and I see the boots, I have to turn it off or walk out, or I can't watch it. It just takes me back. I don't know how I'm standing here doing this right now, but I'm doing the best. I know my voice is a little shaky, but bear with me. As they were approaching towards me, and as I said, I saw the boots coming towards me, there was an announcement, and it said, Anschließen rechts, that everybody's to turn to the right. And that boot, as it was coming towards me, turned to the right, and the next one turned to the right. And we were omitted right there. Anyone who doesn't believe in God, let him come to me and I'll tell him the story. That was only the hand of God. It's like Moses parted the sea. This was, as far as I'm concerned, that was the same story. And they kept on going, and we laid there again for hours, and eventually my father went to check on my mother, and she was there, she was fine. And he says, stay there. Then he went to check on my aunt, and my aunt was right near a mountain, and my father said to her, are you there? And my aunt said, Hendele, his name was Hendel. Hendele, what are you doing here? They just left. She thought that they had just left, but it had been some time, but you didn't know the time and you didn't know how long it took. And he said, okay, just stay there. And he went up on top of the mound and he saw fires all around. But there was a huge road nearby and he saw some motion of people and he walked over closer and closer and closer and he spoke to some of the people and they said, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming, the tanks are coming. And with that, my father came back and he got all of us, and you have to picture this, we're all running towards the road, no longer hungry, no longer scared, no clothes, not even cold, and we're sitting there along the highway watching the tanks come by with the soldiers. And so we knew we were free. One of the soldiers, I remember, jumped down from the tank and he took off his hat and put it on my younger brother's head. He recognized who we were. And he must have been Jewish as well. After that, we went back to our village, our shtetl, and our home was occupied. So my father found another house that was empty. And we stayed there. And my father became very important in our village, in our shtetl. He was a very smart man, and one day they came to him and they said, Hendele, the cows are all dying. What do we do? What do we do? And he said it was a hot day. He turned on the hose. He gave them all water to drink. And within a week, they were better. Well, he became the veterinarian. He also helped them get sap from the trees. And I don't know what they used it for, but that was very important. So my father became very important there. And this Alexander said to him, Hendele, don't plan to stay here. Don't plan to stay here. These Russians are not any better than the Germans were. And so he trusted him, but he says, I can't leave here without my sister, the one that ended up going back into Russia. With my Aunt Henya, this was Basha. So he, I don't know how, but he prepared papers, and with those papers, he went to Moscow, where my mother had a sister living. And he wanted her to come with him, but she couldn't because her son was married to someone who was related to Stalin. And she was sure that if she left, the rest of them would be dead. So I don't know how he found her. I have no, it's unbelievable to me. But then he went, I guess on a train, he went into, deeper into Russia. It wasn't Siberia, it was a kolkhoz where there were working people, like a labor camp. And when my aunt saw him, she says, Hendele, they're going to keep you as well. And my father says, no, they won't. If they would try and keep me or don't let you go with me, they will have to answer to these people because they know I'm coming back and I am needed there. And believe it or not, they let him take her with him. And when he came back, he got us all together and he put us into a cattle car, an empty cattle car. He took along with him a lot of vodka and cigarettes, because not for money, but for vodka or cigarettes in Russia, it takes you a long way. And he planned for us to go to Israel. How did we get to Israel? First, we had to go to a port, and we ended up in Berlin. I remember seeing in Berlin when we arrived on the train, I remember seeing the German soldiers sitting there on the Bahnhof, eating out of their mess cans. It had just opened up. It was just, Germany just had surrendered there. It was just taken over by the Russians, and we were in Berlin on the Russian side. It was divided into 4. Eventually, we ended up in the American zone. And after we left the Russian zone, we ended up in the American zone. My father said, we're not going to stay here, it's too close to the Russians. And he took us to Munich. In Munich, he found out that where all the survivors were, and they were all in DP camp, displaced people. Most of the people there were from the concentration camps. There were a few, I guess, like us, but we didn't know too many. Eventually, there were more like us, but most of them were from the concentration camps. And we lived there. We were there for over 3 years. We went to school there. It was run by the American Army. And we were eating in a mess hall. It was like an army camp, more or less. And we eventually were planning to go to Israel. But when my father heard, if you remember the story of Exodus, the movie Exodus, you had to go by way of Cyprus. And when you got to Cyprus, the Haganah would smuggle you into Israel. And there were a lot of people that died because Israel was not a state yet at the time. And my father said, I didn't save my family from Hitler to lose them in Cyprus. And so my mother wrote to cousins that she had, that she knew they lived with them before the war until the father called for them to come to America. And my mother wrote a postcard to David Schwab, Binghamton, New York, because that's all they knew. They had YMCA on there. And David Schwab no longer lived there. And so they asked, does anyone know this David Schwab? He had a younger brother, Abe, that was still living in Binghamton. He says, oh yes, that's my brother. And he took the postcard, took it to him, and he says, of course I know who this is. This is my cousin Rivka. He took it to Rabbi Silver. I don't know if all of you know Rabbi Silver. There are children here from the David Silver Academy. It was named after him. But he took it to him and he read the postcard to David Schwab, and David Schwab went to Washington, had papers prepared for us, and brought us here to the United States. I didn't know how to speak English. I was just a little girl. I was 14 years old when I came here. It was in 1949. Israel became a state in 48, and I came here in 1949. There are so many stories, I guess, that I could tell you, but I will just touch on some of them. I loved school, I loved the children. So far, I don't know how to speak English. But this David Schwab's wife, Rachel, was going to visit her mother, and she stopped by to see the family. So she took me along with her. She says, "You want to come?" And of course, I don't speak English, and she doesn't speak Yiddish, and the two of us, I didn't care. I went anyway. She says, "I'm going to go to Binghamton after I go to Williamsport, and then I'll go to Binghamton. You'll come with me." She took me to Williamsport and took me across the street to a friend of hers whose mother spoke a little Yiddish, but not very much. But she had 3 children, and they were playing hide and seek. Well, you don't have to speak English to play hide and seek. When they finish counting, you run. I loved it. I was with all of them. I loved being there, and pretty soon Rachel came back for me, and she wanted to continue to Binghamton. I said, "I don't want to go." I was very happy being there. And the mother, Bella, Casnowar's family, said to me, "You go ahead, go with her. When you come back, you'll stay here." Well, I was happy to hear that. I went with her to Binghamton, came back to Williamsport, and I stayed with this Snow Ice family for 6 weeks, like the man that came to dinner and never left. And when I came back to Harrisburg, I spoke English like I do now. The middle daughter, Faye, was my age, and we became very close friends to this day. I brought her in here about a month ago, just to see the reading room. She thought she would be able to be here today too, but she couldn't make it. I loved high school. I was into everything. I could have been a spokesperson for the United States of America. I loved the United States. I remember writing an essay when I was in high school on what freedom means to me. And I remember saying that when I finally saw the Statue of Liberty, I knew I was liberated then, because I was sick for 14 days on that ship coming over here. And when I saw that, I knew I was liberated. As I said, I loved school. I was into every organization there was. I was into all the sports activities. I was on the basketball team, the volleyball team, the tennis team, you name it, I was in it. There was an organization called Seminar in our school, and we ran the whole school. There were 10 people, 10 girls that were voted on scholastically and by the teachers, and we did. And I met my husband when I was a senior in high school. He took me to my senior prom. It was wonderful. After I graduated from high school, I wanted to go to school to take shorthand and to college, to business college. I went in a car, and I caught my hand in the car door, and I couldn't continue taking shorthand. I couldn't continue typing. So my husband says to me, "Well, Linda, why don't we just get married?" We were waiting till I was finished. And I said, "Okay." And we did. And lived happily ever after. I had 3 wonderful children. Steve is my youngest, my son, my middle daughter, Deanie, and my oldest daughter, who went on the March of the Living with me with my youngest granddaughter. For 2 weeks, I told her she's spared from coming. It was really, I had a wonderful life with him. However, life has funny ways, twists and turns. When my youngest son was in high school, my husband got sick. He was sick for 3 years, and he passed away. I was left alone with my 3 children, and somehow or other, I ended up marrying the son of David Schwab, who also lost his wife to cancer. And I think we were married for 23 years before he passed away. And he helped me create the Schwab reading room. Before he passed away, that was his last part of his life, and he helped me to do that. After we were back, my brother Harold, as active as I am in Harrisburg, he is very active in the Carlisle community. I believe this is the first year that he has not sponsored an Israeli soldier in the Carlisle War College. But up till now, every soldier that has come has looked him up. He's never had to solicit it. They've always looked up Harold Swidler, and each soldier would pass his name on to the next soldier. And he helped them find a house, he helped them take the children to school, he helped them buy a car, whatever they need. They became his family. When the Iron Curtain was lifted, he was invited to go to their parties. And he made up with a colonel from Belarusia. And he said to him, "Why don't you go back and see where he came from?" And Harold said, "I don't know, maybe." Anyway, he and Eileen, my sister-in-law, decided that they would do that. They got themselves together and they went back, and he says, "I want to see where I came from." He went back, and this Belarusian colonel's family greeted him at the airport with the name Swidler on there, and they took him back to Miajo. But he was very, there's a lot more to the story, but I will try and make it shorter. He spoke to he still spoke the language, believe it or not. And he still does. I don't anymore, I can barely understand it, but he does. And he saw this very old lady with a babushka over her head, and he said to her, any Jews living here? And she said, yes, there is one. And she showed him where he lived, and he knocked on the door, and he came back, and he said, oh, I remember you. You were a little boy, and he was already older, and he was playing soccer, but he remembered him. And Harold asked him, so where did we live? Because everything changed. He also had asked them, he wanted to see if anyone would remember my father. And he took him back into, in his car, and he saw this. In fact, you might be able to see it on this picture. His name was Alexander. He saw this young man with the boots walking on the road, and he said to him, I'm going to ask him if he knew my father, if he knew your father. And he says, no, he's too young. He wouldn't remember my father. He says, I know this man, and maybe he can tell me who can help. And so, in talking to him, he says, if you don't believe me, I will take you to see my wife's father. He'll tell you all about Hendelet. And Harold asked him what was the wife's father's name. And he said, Alexander. So they went back to his house, and it really was the real Alexander. Now Harold came back, and he woke us up in the middle of the night. He and Eileen were on the phone, and Maury and I are sitting up in the bed, and he says, I found Alexander. Imagine, I mean, this is like a needle in the haystack, but he found him. And that's Alexander and his wife, and this on the right, to the right of the young man is, his name is Monas, the only Jewish man that's left in the shtetl. And this is Harold filming it. And Eileen is taking the picture of all this. There's also a picture there of our family in the DP camp, and above that was the first picture when we first arrived here in the United States. And on the left is a picture of me when I was about 12 years old in the DP camp. Let's see. There are so many other things that I really need to say. It's very, very difficult to remember all this. I had maybe 3 hours of sleep last night thinking of all the things that I had to say, and I don't know if I said them all or not, but I am here talking. I feel that I was saved by God, so I can tell you this, and this is why I'm here today. I'll open it up and let you. Connie, yes.
Okay.
Tell us about how you started playing golf.
Connie wanted to know how I started to play golf. Well, actually, again, my brother Harold, who used to caddy when he was still in high school at Blue Ridge. And he taught my husband how to play golf too. He took him with him and he taught him how to play golf. And shortly after we were married, my husband said, you have to learn how to play golf too. And it didn't take me very long, and I learned how to play golf.
If there are questions, I can come around with the microphone here.
You're such an important and long-time supporter of Holocaust education. If you could pick one thing that you would feel would be the most important thing that Holocaust educators teach children or students about the war, about the Holocaust, what would that be?
Oh, that's very hard. One thing. What I usually say before I leave is there's very few of us left. And after my generation, I'm one of the youngest. There won't be anyone. And I feel compelled to speak. And I usually tell them that all of you, especially you young people, and this is, education is the most important part of my delivery. I tell them that you all will be my ambassadors. Because when I'm gone and they tell you that the Holocaust never happened, you will say, yes, it did. I met Mrs. Schwab, and I know how she survived. I survived in that forest where the movie Defiance was filmed. It was the very same forest, except we were not with the Bielski family. We were by ourselves. We didn't know at that time of the Bielski family, not until we were in the DP camp. Yes, Rabbi.
Thank you for sharing your reflections and your memories, Linda.
I'm just wondering if you might say a word or two about resilience. I mean, it seems to me, what you shared today, what we've talked about privately on other occasions, you've overcome so much in your lifetime, and I just wonder if you have any thoughts of what contributed to your ability to do that, and to keep going on and on and on, overcoming one challenge after another.
I really don't know how to answer that. I really don't know how to answer it, because going through all that I went through in the Holocaust, and then have so many tragedies that happened to me, you almost want to not believe in God. And I said to the rabbi once, I said, have I sinned? So what have I done to sin to have all these things happen to me after the Holocaust? And the rabbi said to me, I wish I could tell you. So I wish I was smarter, that I could tell you. I don't know, I just don't know what else to say. Yes?
Are you aware of what happened to the other Jewish people who lived in your village?
Yes. Yes, we were. Most of the people that lived in our village that survived in the ghetto were taken to a concentration camp. And you all know what happens from the concentration camp. They take it right into the ovens. And while we were in Germany, in the DP camp, my father found two nieces of my mother's who survived the concentration camp, and they told us how the mother was with them, and the mother went right in the oven, and the two of them went to the right. I have a little story to tell you that I'm sure Dr. Glick will allow me to do this, because he did tell the story, and I just thought that his mother was really lived in Poland, right next to us, right in the village next door. And he spoke at a Yom HaShoah, and he delivered a beautiful speech, and I asked his wife to send me a copy of what he spoke about. And she did, kindly. And after he spoke, he said he was in Washington, and he was at a work conference of some sort, where there were a lot of children of survivors, is that right?
Yeah, it was a gathering of children of survivors.
Children of survivors. And he said his mother was in the concentration camp. And he said his mother was on duty to dig the graves for the people that they brought in from the typhus epidemic. And she saw, as he was in the meeting, this lady came up to him and she said, do you know a Sonia Glick? And he says, yes, that's my mother. And this lady said to him, your mother saved my life. And she told him the story of when they went to bury her in that pile, in that hole. The lady kind of winked her eye that Sonia knew she was alive. And that night, she went out and picked her up and brought her into the barracks and saved her life.
Right out of the
It was just one of the stories that I heard. I want you to know that I came back and told it to his mother, and she says, I never told the story to him. How did he remember? So I told him how. Any other questions?
We have time for maybe one more question, if there's one. So with that, then let us conclude. Let us thank our speaker.
Did I- Thank you very much.
We invite you now to all hang around, spend some time, help yourself to some further refreshments, and continue the conversation. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Because we all have